Thank you so much, Amy. Good morning, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I could not have asked for a better panel than this. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking out time on the panel today. Since we have limited time, so I'll probably dive straight in. And I don't think we have to establish the fact that automation has been the hottest enterprise software category in terms of valuation counts and to Pari's point earlier in the day, in terms of how it's driving digital agendas for a lot of enterprises. My straightforward question is that the journey to automation has definitely not been an easy one for enterprises. We've been talking to the leading 250 global companies, and the common theme there is that they need to orchestrate between a lot of scenarios, including process discovery, data transformation, business process reengineering, workflows, and RPA, to truly unleash its potential, right? So, Sidney, if I can get started with you, just continuing the thought on diversity here. Uh, you've been a power user of automation. You've done automation centers of excellence for a number of years now at different organizations. What's your opinion on how companies are really navigating this labyrinth, this maze of automation complexity? At what point are we in the automation journey of the enterprises at this moment?
Thanks for that question, Praveen. So I think we are at a very interesting point in this journey. We're seeing the rapid maturity of the market, specifically in terms of the vendors. So I can call out, for example, the new entry of Automation Anywhere with Google and that partnership. Microsoft has entered the RPA arena. So there's a wide variety of investments that are being made in terms of the potential of the market and the direction that we are planning to go in. And it's very interesting because the market is rapidly expanding, and we are starting to see how those providers are envisioning that maturity model. However, when you look at the majority of the companies that are currently either ramping up an RPA program or beginning to think more seriously about digital transformation, we don't see the same rapid advancement. And I've seen quite a number of statistics that point to the fact that it's very difficult for most enterprise level firms to achieve. There's a specific benchmark, and we can debate whether or not this benchmark should exist, but it's a benchmark in relation to the number of processes that you have automated in relation to the number of years that you have had a footprint in the intelligent automation space. And we're seeing quite a gap in terms of how many companies can actually reach that threshold in relation to the number of bots and the footprint of resources that they have, which goes to tell me that there are a number of challenges when we start actually talking about implementing this technology on the ground level. So taking it out of the realm of what is the art of, I call the impossible, pulling it down into what we actually want to build on. It seems like there's a disconnect there, like in terms of actually establishing this as something that is truly going to drive digital transformation. And it remains to be seen whether or not we can speed up the maturity level and the wisdom that we are pulling in across industries in relation to the best ways to scale.
Perfect. And we will talk a little bit more about the challenges, Sydney, specifically at Spotify and other companies that you have led this initiative. But if I can bring Denise now from Appian. Denise, in your view, as Sydney mentioned, that there are challenges and enterprises are looking at maturity levels of automation. Are they doing it, in your view, in a structured fashion, or you see this as a kind of an ad hoc evolution of the technology in the enterprise segment? What's your perspective there?
So thanks for the question, Praveen. I think that like any implementation, right, Typically, people are going after the low-hanging fruit and thinking, hey, maybe I just put in a simple workflow or simple automation. But I would challenge organizations to really think through the entire return on investment. And maybe it's better to go after high value added scenarios, right? So, perfect example I look at is, we have TELUS, who's one of our telco customers in Canada. And what they did is they came in, they used low code in order to do the 5G launch to about 10 million users. And then after they came in and started to leverage that to automate about 20,000 reads through emails, they actually then said, hey, how do I build off the low code platform and then come in and add IDP? So they took another business scenario for lease management and added that piece in as a phase 2. And now, by the way, in their phase 3, they came in and then they added RPA and added 5 bots to do some automation on that front. So now they're combining pretty much the power of low code automation. And I think that, again, if you're going after true ROI and looking at not just the low-hanging fruit, but truly, how do I do it as, any type of enterprise rollout? Because I think when we think about automation, we're thinking about turning on a bot and making it as simple as possible. I think that you have to treat automation projects like enterprise projects. Kind of think about when you put in ERP software, like you didn't come in and just say, hey, I put in order to cash, right, or supply chain. You're coming in and you're putting out a multi-phase rollout for a true end-to-end value scenario across the entire enterprise.
Right. I think this multi-phased approach with the end goal of transformation makes a lot of sense, Denise. But one of the challenges we've been constantly hearing from customers, the fact that there are several technologies at play here, right? Some of the ones that you also called out, which is low code, no code, RPA, workflow automations. We have the added complexities of APIs. Now artificial intelligence is coming in as a wrapper with the promise of doing enterprise grade automation. Software always was positioned as an automation tool. Josh, what's your take on this? How should enterprises really think of these technologies? Are these competing technologies? They are complementary technologies. What's the limitation that the enterprises have today in deriving value out of their automation initiatives?
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion. And I know this just because we talk to customers all the time. And, we were asked a lot of the time, hey, how do I make sense of all this stuff? I've got, something that's going to discover a process or map a process. I've got RPA and everybody's banging on the RPA drum. They're not really seeing the ROI in all cases, a lot of heavily customized heavy consulting projects associated to a lot of those historical RPA projects. There's different levels of ROI people are getting. There's clear ROI where you take a human out of a process and, you just get the raw efficiency. But sometimes that ROI really isn't that exciting to decision makers because, they didn't really transform a process. And so when you combine kind of the different ways people have employed automation technology, and then just trying to get a grip or an understanding of how it all looks, it can be fairly daunting for an organization. And I think part of the reason for that is the way automation starts in a company. It's typically a point problem, lack of developer resources, lack of IT resources available to solve that problem. They're way down the list on the priority list for IT or the solutions delivery organization within a large enterprise. So they go out and find a tool, maybe associated to a larger platform or a best of breed capability. And they go and they solve that one problem. And then other people in the organization notice and they're like, wow, how did you do that in 2 weeks? I would have assumed you'd have hired a developer or whatever. So they go through that process, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you got a couple of solutions. And you start getting into these almost like accidental, automation initiatives within an organization that start from a department or from IT or from the ground up, somebody who's just trying to solve a problem. And then before you know it, you've got a portfolio of these automated solutions. And it's starting to raise eyebrows, and the dollars are starting to get a little higher in terms of investment. And then people are like, hey, what should we be doing around this? So if you're in IT and solutions delivery, you've already got some automation capabilities within the company for these various reasons. They grew organically. Now you're just trying to get a handle on it because the CIO is asking, hey, what's our automation story now? Because some of the larger players are creating a lot of air cover in this area. So what we always try to advise customers on is, hey, you're going to have more than one capability. You're going to have more than one technology. So let's put them into 3 categories. 3 is usually something easy for people to get their heads around. And so we talk about process discovery. Process discovery includes things like, process mining technologies, process mapping capabilities that an organization can use to actually understand their end-to-end processes. Then you talk about process automation, which is the second piece of that. So presumably you understand your processes, then you know what you need to automate and you map a way forward. In process automation, you have things like workflow automation, forms, capabilities, document generation. You've got application builders and RPA. And then the third piece is really around process analytics, process management. How do you create a virtuous cycle of improvement? Because these things aren't just a one and done kind of deal.
Yes.
You've always got to improve this stuff. So we try to encourage customers to think of it that way. And then we look at what they have. And obviously we have an agenda at Nintex for our technology that fits within the context of that. But we rarely see a customer that has only one vendor's technology. Usually it's the right mix for the right strategy. And that's where we start seeing much more evolved companies, much more evolved automation kind of portfolios or centers of excellence. But it doesn't always start out that way.
Right. No, I really like the segmentation, the way you talked about the 3 categories. Stephen, you've been, at Microsoft overall has been focused on automation, and you've been a company which has been around for several decades now, and you've been always working with pro developers, pro code developers, and all of that. How are you solving, or how are you reducing the complexity of customers today? Talk to us about the 3 segments that Josh talked about, and unbundle the confusion for customers. How should they really think about automation holistically?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think if we just take a step back for a moment, Microsoft has absolutely been focused on professional developers. But if you think about technologies like macros in Excel, we've kind of been focused on the classical citizen developers for decades as well. So it really does span all the way from the folks who are those people using Visual Studio, using tools like Azure, down to the people who are using tools like Excel, and more recently technologies in the Power Platform like Power Apps and Power Automate. But I do like that cycle that we just talked about of it starts from process discovery, from understanding the types of challenges that folks are facing. And there's obviously a bunch of different tools in the market. From Microsoft's perspective, we recently released a new tool called Process Advisor. That's part of the Power Platform that helps people to kind of record and discover what it is that they're doing in their everyday processes. Just identifying when it is that you're copy and pasting data between 2 systems. And then, of course, that can be taken to the next level when you can then identify how to automate that, how to use tools that are across the whole industry. Of course, with Microsoft, we have Power Automate, but really across the board, there's a wide variety of different tools out there that can take those incremental steps, right? You have somebody who spent a bunch of time moving data into SAP, somebody who spent a bunch of time copying data into Excel, taking that step, automating that, and then continuing to iterate, finding the next thing in the process. To allude to an earlier topic, we were talking about how you should really think about automation as an enterprise grade thing. And I definitely agree with that being an aspect of automation, but I would challenge that you necessarily need to start there. Yeah. I do think that there's a lot of value in providing individuals inside organizations the way to do this full cycle just on their own without having to, operationalize an entire end-to-end CIO driven automation strategy. Because when you have individuals who are empowered to just use the tools at their fingertips, to build out ways to improve their own productivity, that then can grow inside an organization where every team can feel empowered to be successful. And then, of course, you do absolutely need that enterprise grade view as well, right? I mean, you need the whole spectrum. But I think there's a lot of value at different pieces. And what we've been really focused at Microsoft is how do we provide the ease of use and the simplicity for individuals to get started, but at the same time, not compromise on the enterprise grade view that allows you to scale that automation from small to large.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Just the consumerization of automation, if I can call it that, right? Just the ability of individuals to use that and eventually make it an enterprise priority. I think that's a great point. Anthony, you have the advantage of looking at it more holistically because you work on different platforms. You are a services company. Talk to us about the sort of competition which is brewing between APIs, RPA, low code, no code. Are enterprises clear about it? Are they confused about it? What's been your read of the market?
Yeah, Praveen, thank you for the question. I think our customers, and a lot of this has been mentioned earlier, are really trying to put their strategy together around all of these different platforms, whether it's low code, no code, RPA, API integrations, and how they should use it, right? And so there's a lot of struggle with what's the right thing to do. I think from an SI standpoint, what we try and bring to our clients is a really good understanding of where to use each of the platforms and which situation to use them in. Right. Second is when we work well with our platform partners, we've already built something that is close to what the customer's trying to do, right? So we're able to give them a head start on the problem they're trying to solve. And then I think number three is the enablement of the enterprise customers, right? So for us, it's really helping our customers be able to use the right tools on their own and then be able to really scale and make use of the platforms most effectively for the problems they're trying to solve. And so we try and bring all that together, working with the platform partners to make our clients most successful.
Right. Makes sense. So going back to the ROI comment, I think a couple of you mentioned about the ROI. And I think if I look at the theme of our conference, we've been constantly talking about this talent and technology war. And the point of view that we have in mind is that the end outcomes of this technology and talent war has to be around improved customer experience and better employee experience, higher order partner experience, and so on. And we feel that cost is just going to get taken care of, right? Cost cannot be the real driver for these kind of investments on digital transformation that companies. I know, Sidney, you and I chatted in our pre-panel discussion. You have done about 100 bots in production at your current company, and you've worked with several vendors and so on. Are we at a point where automation is moving beyond a cost-centric conversation to more a customer, employee, and partner experience conversation? Why and why not?
That is an excellent question. I believe we are not, but I think that is a long overdue conversation. I actually was having a conversation with my team yesterday about this. The heavy focus on cost savings, I think, is to the detriment of your ability to scale as a COE. And I fundamentally think that this is one of the challenges that we hit as intelligent automation kind of senior leaders. We're constantly asked to prove out the ROI. However, I think it was Denise that pointed this out. If we think about other enterprise-led programs, typically, for instance, we have, your company may have a Salesforce instance, right? Are you asked to prove out why you have Salesforce? Or is it that that the amount of work that you need to do and the specific business processes necessitate the use of that tool, right? And so that's what I truly hope I'll say the intelligent automation industry pivots to, which is the internal workings of how do we optimize our employee workforce? How do we upskill everyone, as Stephen was pointing out? How do we improve employee satisfaction, reduce attrition? How do we improve data quality? How do we decrease any kind of debt that we may have in terms of global requirements, right? Regulatory requirements. All of that bundled together paints a picture, a business case of necessity, right? Of necessity of these types of tools and of this technology stack. And I think that's where, if I look at the industry as a whole, we haven't matured in that, towards that direction in terms of the conversations that we have with our CTOs, our CIOs. They are still primarily looking at return on investment, particularly in terms of like headcount reduction, hours saved, instead of looking at the holistic picture of, okay, the fundamental elements of our enterprise necessitate the existence of a program and the existence of the tool stack that we're building.
Great point. Stephen, I mean, Microsoft has been long evangelizing productivity related solutions. What's your take on ROI? It still has to be cost centric and hours saved centric, or is it elevating to customer, partner, and employee experience attributes as well?
No, I think I agree that we need to move maybe a little bit away from this focus on the math of, you know, how many dollars does it take to implement this automation, subtract the cost savings, and hopefully that number is beneficial. You know, when we look at the scenarios that we often talk about, it's making an individual, making their own work more productive, right? So if I can just spend less time copying and pasting, you know, sure, like in aggregate, there's going to be cost savings for the company because like you can figure out how to deploy those savings. But just me as an individual, my quality of work is better, yes, right? It's more reliable if automation can do this thing more effectively than I can as an individual copy and pasting data. So improving productivity is about how to think of the individual, their job getting done more effectively in many cases. And that the other reason why we like to take cost out of the equation a little bit is because we've been really focused at Microsoft on how do we really democratize everybody to get started with automation. So one of the things that we announced recently is that Power Automate Desktop, which is our RPA tool, will actually be available for free for all Windows 10 users. And the reason that's important is because we don't want people to think about the costs of automation up front. We want them to instead think about how can this improve the productivity of people at their day-to-day jobs. And then over time, you will be able to identify the kind of those broader enterprise things that can truly lead to cost savings. But starting from cost savings and starting from the math, I don't think will be as effective of just thinking about how can we improve the productivity of individuals inside of organizations.
Great, great. So changing gears a little bit, Denise, I wanted to come back to you. I think there's this ongoing debate about enterprises building their own automation stack versus working with third parties. Of course, low code, no code is a pretty lucrative option, and a lot of customers are interested in buying that versus trying to build their own automation technology and so on. What's been your read of the market? What are the pros and cons of doing it on your own versus working with third-party platforms? What works and what doesn't work?
Yeah, by the way, I think you can have the best of both worlds, right? So literally when I look at Appian, we have a low-code automation platform, but we also produce solutions based on horizontal needs as well as industry needs. So when we started the pandemic, for example, we noticed that everyone needed a way to return to work. So we launched workforce safety. So a customer like, University of South Florida, they can come in and they can add to their existing investments in low code and then come in and also add the workforce safety on top of it. And our partners can come in and build off of our platform. To date, there are over 70 partner platforms that are extensive, not just, the piecemeal piece, but truly looking at everything from, contributing to, let's say, workforce safety with us, to connected claims, to coming in to focus on government acquisitions, federal acquisitions, which is not an easy task, right? So we're truly looking at how do you take the combination of platform and then provide pre-built solutions either from our side or let our partners build on top of our platform. And then that gives our customer choice. Because at the end, as Sidney and a few other folks mentioned on the panel, there is a strong push for ROI, but if you could come in and immediately adopt a solution to resolve a business pain, you're going to end up saving 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever that timing to build out the holistic platform. So I think you can truly have the best of both worlds if you truly invest in the community and have, partners as well as customers contribute around the IP as well as overall solutions.
Got it. So Josh, just extending the thought, what Denise mentioned, right? Building a community and having the best of both worlds. I think one of the things that we constantly hear from our customers about the verticalization of the automation stack. I think recently WorkFusion raised about 200 million and their positioning was largely around a couple of use cases in BFSI, and their entire stack is kind of orchestrated towards that. Are we at a moment in automation industry where verticalization is going to play a big role? And in your view as a customer success officer, how do you how should enterprises really prioritize their platforms if that's the ultimate objective?
It just depends on what we mean by verticalization, because it's a pretty big, broad topic. When we think about any horizontal player like Nintex, Appian, Microsoft, some of the vendors here that are represented, our solutions take very much a vertical nature in every case, right? You think about one of the biggest use cases that are out there is really around compliance, and compliance is kind of a horizontal topic, but when you get into the vertical nature of a business, it takes on its own life. So the solutions that customers have to deliver, so for instance, using Nintex workflow, focusing on those capabilities that are really around, different ROI equation around compliance, which is really the ROI is what you're not going to get fined, essentially. And it's very necessary and very important for businesses. And I think you'll see across all the vendors, that's the key use case. Now, when you get into financial services, that's very different than when you get into healthcare.
Yes.
The key for vendors like us is to ensure that our tools have the features and functionality required to accommodate those vertical specific use cases, if that makes sense. I think where you see the vertical nature of automation come into play, very specifically tied to a particular vertical and not really going outside that vertical, is where you look into things like core banking solutions, for instance, as an example, right? They would have their own level of automation within the application, within the platform, in order to accommodate many, many common scenarios within that vertical of banking, right? You'd see the same thing in healthcare and a lot of other capabilities that are out there. So I do believe the vertical nature of automation takes on a real relevant life as it pertains to these, packaged applications for vertical companies, and needing a surround strategy for those applications. You're going to see more of these solutions have very specific automation capabilities around that vertical, because it's just too hard to continue to deliver packaged feature sets to accommodate every scenario a business needs. Now, at the same time, I think what you see is companies like Nintex, Appian, and others that will continue to innovate in its platforms so that we can accommodate those vertical use cases as well. So that's the connector strategy, how we connect to, a core banking solution. And how do we do that in a much more sophisticated way than just, surfacing API level, kind of data, but rather how do we really investigate and how do we become very relevant within that core vertical solution. And I think you'll continue to see companies like Nintex and others, invest in those connector strategies, be even more specifically relevant in key verticals moving forward, just depending on what the strategies are.
Perfect. Anthony, is that where the biggest opportunity for partner community lies in terms of the whole verticalization and, like the connector part that Josh talked about? Is that a big opportunity that you see as a partner in the automation world?
Yeah, I do, Praveen, right? I mean, because what we bring as a healthcare and life science specific vertical team is we bring that understanding of the business. And,
Right.
Denise and Josh mentioned it. One example, during COVID, a lot of practitioners, providers, doctors were moving around the country, and they have to be certified in each state. And we've worked with one of our platform partners to automate that certification process to help bring people, into different states, certify that, their backgrounds and all the things that they need to have in order to practice in that state. So that's just one example. We're taking, something in healthcare, using a platform, and then applying that to a business process very quickly, right, to solve a specific problem.
Perfect. I think we've got a very interesting audience question. So I'm going to ask this very quickly to maybe Stephen and Denise to have your point of view as well. The question really is, does the concept of citizen developer dilute the efficacy of digital transformation programs as is the management of technical debt becomes even more complex because a lot more people are dealing with technology? How do you respond to that, Stephen and Denise?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, in general, digital transformation can happen at any level inside an organization. So anytime you have a citizen developer who's taking it upon themselves to improve their own productivity, that is moving digital transformation forward. So I wouldn't say that citizen development as a general approach dilutes digital transformation. Now, it is an interesting trade-off there that as you have more citizen developers building out automation or low-code applications on top of existing technology stacks, you are creating more dependencies on that existing technology. But I would say that the advantage of a citizen developer platform like what we offer is that because it is centrally visible and centrally governed, you can actually use that as a tool to understand which areas of a legacy infrastructure could potentially see the highest ROI for modernization. Right. And likewise, things can be automatically migrated and swapped out underneath, depending on your technology choice. So I think, is actually an accelerator for digital transformation and less of an impediment.
So Denise, your quick point. I know we're running out of time, but very quickly, your comment on this.
Yeah, look, I think that with the pandemic, as you mentioned, the technical debt has increased tremendously. And if you look at, automation topics, whether it be low code, IDP, whatever you mention as the core, is really about bringing IT and business together. And so do I think that it's one or the other as part of citizen development and professional development? I think that there could always be a happy median, right, in the company. And I think what we really need to focus on is how do you get through the shortage of projects and really come in and, whether it's 8 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever it is, add value to the business. We have a massive shortage when it comes to the development side. So the biggest advantage we see, especially on the low code automation side, is the ability to make a developer productive in 8 weeks versus a year. So I think that, again, and looking at citizens development, you need to also make sure that DevOps is truly functional and is centralized and it can be managed with IT. So the reality is, I don't think it's one or the other. I think you got to look at the business and see what the right mix is.
Awesome. I know we're almost at time, but one last question for Sidney and one for Anthony. Sidney, give us a few points of arrivals for 2025. Where do you see automation, investments of enterprises over the next 5 years?
I definitely see the market streamlining, and we're starting to see that today in terms of just the players in the field I'll say narrowing and really combining the functionality of the tools into a more comprehensive tool stack that can be leveraged. I would also think, I truly believe citizen development is a fundamental part of that future state. I think, to Stephen's point, as we continue to scale, we will see more and more enterprises understand and embrace the concept of kind of accelerated digital transformation by embracing both citizen development and more traditional COE-led development. That's how our center of excellence is arranged today at Spotify. So we're big believers in running both workflows simultaneously, and because that way you have the top down and you have the bottom up approach coming together for that full transformation. I have not seen, in my experience, very many firms approaching both at the same time with the same level of intensity. So I believe that will change moving forward. And then I think the concept of digital transformation will become, I want to say, almost commonplace, where you will start to see a big divide in terms of a company's ability to retain their market share based on whether or not they have made the previous gains in this area the years prior. So I think you really need to start looking as a CIO, CTO, CFO, even all the way out to 2025, which again, we're forward focused in that manner at Spotify, and thinking through how can we continue to maintain that cutting edge approach if we look out to where we hope to be in the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm hopeful that the enterprise will continue to expand the embrace of digital technology and digital transformation, and it will become more commonplace, almost routine, I should say.
Perfect. Anthony, one thing that probably Sidney didn't talk much about, and I wanted your point of view, is this debate about IT owning it versus line of business owning it. Where do you see this going in the next 5 years? I mean, not today. Today, the answer could be both, but what's your future prediction for IT versus LOB battle on automation?
Yeah, I think it's, and I think people are saying about democratization, it's the dispersion of these capabilities out to the business and the IT. And as we're saying, it's going to become normal to be able to, use these types of tools. And I think they're going to become more and more intelligent, right? As AI, becomes better and you can put more data into and have these tools and platforms learn as they go. So I don't think there's going to be a distinction between IT and business. I think it's going to be dispersed within the organizations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I know we are about time, so I'll probably wrap it up here, but I really appreciate your time and thanks for sharing all the inputs very candidly. And I hope the audience benefits from it, and really we can get to the points of arrival that Sidney talked about in 2025. Look forward to catching up more, and thank you so much for your time.